Welcome to another podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about limerence, which is a specific topic I'm going to talk all about and explain and my experiences with it. Okay, I'm going to read the Google definition so I've got it right and I'm not getting it wrong. Okay, so limerence is an unhealthy, obsessive mixture of emotions, okay? It is considered as a cognitive and emotional state of being emotionally attached to or even obsessed with another person. It is typically experienced involuntarily and characterized by a strong desire for reciprocation of one's feelings, a near obsessive form of romantic love. Okay, basically, limerence can feel just like love, and it's very dangerous. You can also have limerence within friendships, and I'll get into that, but it's basically the confusion being you are obsessed with this person and the main goal is you need to feel validated by this specific person, and if there's any point where you don't feel reciprocated, validated, seen by this person, you will fall completely apart and basically not realise the power that this person has. But it's not the person's fault and it's not your fault, it's all very involuntarily. Now my experiences with this is very interesting because I didn't know that I had limerence or was going through limerence, whatever it is, until I started talking about my last proper relationship with my therapist, and she kind of taught me all about it basically. And looking back on it now it's so far away, I'm like, whoa, she hit the nail on the head with it. Because while you're going through it, you think, no, I love this person, fuck off type thing. I don't have any issues, maybe I'm a bit unhealthily attached to them, but that's normal. But no, looking back on it, when I Google limerence or look at the checklist that she gave me, every single thing is ticked. So I really want to talk about it because I really didn't understand it, and the lines between that and genuine love or platonic love for your friends, it can all get so blurred and it's so dangerous. So I really want to talk about it and get into it. A little bit of an addiction, because basically what it is you start with an obsession of someone, a crush almost, but it's not a normal crush. You've seen someone you like and you really want them, and the goal is to kind of get them, and that's what is the fun part of it. Then you get them and then you are so overwhelmingly happy that it becomes a sort of proper limerence where you attach yourself to them and their validation is the most important thing to you. You will drop everything, so you don't care about your friends' opinions, your family's opinions. You even will drop some of your own standards and boundaries at times, probably forgive them for things that you would never normally do, but because you're in limerence with this person, it is so difficult because it's just an obsession basically. Where it comes from is super interesting. It can come from multiple things. It can come from trauma, it can come from patterns of OCD, abandonment issues, insecurities, but the main logistic of limerence is normally when a child's grown up with an unstable upbringing. So not necessarily anything traumatic, and a lot of people I feel watch my podcasts or think about healing and therapy and think you have to go through something really traumatic. A lot of the issues in the world and issues within yourself are probably the minuscule things that just need looking into, but they're not necessarily anything really scary and deep. A lot of people don't realise that the way they were brought up has really affected them today, can affect you as a person, in your relationships, friendships, jobs, whatever it is. So I really urge, and I always say, the first step of healing is to really go back and look at your upbringing, and this is what a therapist will do with you if you do psychodynamic therapy. They'll go all the way back to your birth, because literally every core thing is so important into who you are today, why you're the way you are. And if you've had an unstable kind of parenthood or inconsistent where 1 minute it's good but then the next minute it's bad, or maybe you've grown up with a parent that has mood swings, bipolar, or anything where it's it doesn't feel very safe, it's never consistent where you can rely on the household being in a good state. It's kind of you're walking around eggshells and you're never quite sure of what the mood of the house is going to be. That inconsistency can create this limerence. It can create abandonment issues, and most of the time it creates an anxious attachment style, which is 100% what I ended up with. And it means that you basically rely on other people's opinions, love, to feel seen, to feel valued and worthy. And that's so dangerous because, one, you don't have any self-esteem yourself, and 2, you're giving so much power to other people. So 100% that is something that you have to go to therapy for and heal. And I'm so glad that I feel like I wouldn't say overcome it, because when I talk about ego, that's where it's slipping back in. So if sometimes I'm seeking a little bit of validation or my ego's coming out, that's still a little bit of like wanting other people's attention. Do you know what I mean? But it might not be 100% healed, because just the way I am. 2, we're human. It is possible to overcome it. It's just a very hard task. But yeah, on the majority, I've done a lot of hard work, and that's been my main bit of therapy and healing, is to overcome this anxious attachment, because I was in a very long relationship where I literally attached myself to this person, and if this person wasn't happy with me, was in a bad mood with me, or wasn't really showing me as much love as like normal, I would literally lose the plot. And like, where it can become difficult is because, 1, you're not doing it on purpose, you're valid in the way you're reacting, in the sense of it's come from trauma, it's come from your upbringing, but then how you react to someone if they've not triggered you, that's where you're wrong. And that's where like sometimes I do upset people, sometimes I have like reacted in a bad way and the person didn't do anything to deserve that reaction, and that's 100% where I have to sit down and like think about it and heal. But my issue is I feel like I was in a relationship with someone that was the opposite of me, was an avoidant attachment style, and we would constantly trigger each other. But I'm also in limerence with this person, so whenever it was rookie or I felt like this person was off of me, that literally was the end of the world to me. And it will never make sense to people unless they've been through the same thing, and this kind of like anxious attachment style of they are everything, and it's so dangerous, and you have to kind of take that person right off the pedestal, learn to detach yourself from that. And we'll get into that later about how to break limerence, but it's very dangerous and quite intense, and to the point where you can get really jealous of any other connections that your favourite person has, because everything just feels like you're being rejected and abandoned and left alone, because you're not being 100% validated and seen in that moment. And then some people react okay, some people react crazy, do you know what I mean? So it's very important that like, if you're watching this and thinking maybe that's you with this person, please keep listening. Limerence is always compared to like substance abuse issues, because it's very similar in the way of like the endorphins go high and low. It's basically an addiction, because it is so addictive. Like, when you find someone that you're in limerence with, them giving you like good validation, that's exactly what you want. When you get that, you don't just like react happy like a normal person would. That is like a hit, that's like a drug, and you're on such a high that when you're not given that level of like validation, it feels like a complete low, and not just like a middle ground. There is no such thing as a middle ground with this. It's literally, well, for me anyway, this is my experience, it was either a high or a low, and if you weren't giving me that high, you hated me. Do you know what I mean? So it was very, very dangerous, and it becomes addictive, because then you're constantly chasing that high, and the reason you probably won't leave if this person lets you down or isn't quite like, not necessarily has done anything completely wrong at this point, but might just be like slipping in the sense of your normal standards or your boundaries, and you're ignoring them because you don't care. As long as you get that high again, that's all you care about, and it's literally like a drug. It's really common in people with ADHD, because it's the exact same principle as like with ADHD, when you get like obsessed with new hobbies for a bit and new foods and new music and stuff, and it's like a comfort, you put it on repeat. This is basically what you're doing with people. You have favourite people, and it's like flavours of the month a little bit. Like, you can become obsessed with a friend. It's not just relationships, a friend or a person for ages and ages, but then like it can fizzle out, and if you're done with that thing, it just does end. And that's kind of very common in ADHD. With limerence, it's a little bit harder, in the sense of like, the only way limerence really does end is like after years and years, and it just dissolves, and that's where you might start to notice that like you don't love each other as passionately as you used to, and you're wondering what's going on, and it's probably just the limerence has faded. But with a lot of people, for me, I feel like my limerence did fade a little bit, but it still had a hold of me. For me, the only way it worked was no contact. And like a complete disrespect, because then it wakes you up, it shakes you, and it's like, whoa, this person does not respect you. Why are they so high on this pedestal? Why are you so obsessed with them? And that's what happened to me, and I feel like I woke up instantly from it. And then the no contact 100% helped, and that's quite like a similar thing with ADHD again, where like out sight, out of mind, you'll just forget about it. It can be crazy because it's like, but I was so obsessed. But I promise, as soon as that no contact and it's like the chapter's done, the way limerence works and your brain is programmed is you will just not care and think about it ever again. In the grand scheme of things, majority of the time with limerence, unless you go to therapy and heal, it would just shift to something or someone else, and that's pretty common. Like, you'll just search for the next thing instead. You won't really care about that person or that hobby. It's done now, you'll just move on. But like, that's where you have to be careful that you're not jumping around, not just from person but thing to thing, trying to fill this void, when instead you need to go to therapy and understand, why do you have limerence? Why have you got attachment issues? Where do they come from? Now, how can you unwind it? The good thing about limerence, like, there's going to be a lot of shade towards it, but the good thing I found is people with limerence can love so intensely. Like, people that can experience limerence will love like you've never seen before. And I take that as a superpower, that like I have the potential to love someone so hardly. Like, it is a good thing. But where healing comes into place is, well, why can't I reciprocate that energy towards myself? And for the last year or two, that's what I've been doing, is I've been pouring that intense love that seemed quite scary at one point, but I've been pouring it into myself, and I feel like I've now understood myself in a way that no one can break again and no one can tear down, and no amount of attention or validation I get from someone will shake my like core foundations that I've now built, if that makes sense. Like, no one can take my power away. And the reason I say that is because another thing with limerence is you will do anything to get validation from this person, which means you're probably not being your authentic self. You've probably masked and put a complete persona on. Like, for me, I was listening to music that I didn't actually like because I didn't want to play my music in case I got made fun of and I didn't impress this person. And I wouldn't like cook the foods I liked and stuff in case I messed it up or in case the person didn't like it. And I would basically live my life for them and impressing them, and I was never myself. And as soon as I walked away from that and found all these things I liked, it was completely different, and it was just mind-boggling to think that like how far I went with it, basically. The scary part is like you can have limerence in the sense of like you've met someone or you're friends with someone and you have limerence, but if it never becomes a relationship, it normally fizzles out and it's okay. But when you start getting into an actual relationship, that's where it's quite dangerous. Now, limerence can turn into healthy love. Like, normally you see this in adult relationships where they were like dating from young and like it's intense, and then as they get older, like it's faded, but they've turned it into a healthy love that just does work. So there's a lot of research behind this that you might need to look more into. But like when you're in a relationship with someone and then like they don't do something or they hurt you or they upset you, like it literally feels like a personal attack. And like for me, it would like literally send me into a rage. And you just really have to dig deep as to where this comes from and everything. I think the one big thing with limerence is you have to, one, understand it and control it, then forgive yourself because it's going to come with a lot of guilt, and then look at who the person was that you had limerence for. And you know, if it's someone that like was fine and normal, then you got to let them go. But also, the person you could be seeing could have been triggering you so badly and making the limerence worse, as in kind of love bombing and like buying you all this nice stuff and like treating you really well one minute, and then doing the one things that you've told them really trigger you. And it's literally, again, it releases endorphins when they do that, and then the low comes again, and this is what I mean by a drug. So yeah, it can be really scary, and this is very closely linked to having a favourite person if you suffer with BPD. It's all very similar, and I feel like there's still not enough research, especially into girls with ADHD as well. Like, it's all very similar to the same thing. But you don't need to be ashamed of it, you just have to understand where it comes from, why you're the way you are, and how you're going to unlearn that. And basically, all it is for limerence is you don't have enough self-love because you've been let down by people in the past and your upbringing. It's not your fault, but what you've been left with is not much self-love, and that means you're going to seek external validation in the sense of having limerence for someone and becoming obsessed with people, or getting into dangerous drug use or dangerous hobbies, things that you know are hurting you and know are bad for you, but you're going to do it anyway because it does give you a high, and you just have to be very, very careful. So my best advice to kind of get rid of this limerence for someone is you have to take them off the pedestal. Now, it's so hard if you're in the midst of this limerence and you think everything's fine. I can't really help you. This is what's sad, is you have to come to it on your own terms. But if you're realising that you're putting this person's life above your own, that's where you have to shake yourself up, okay, and write down a list of what do they actually do for you that's good, and what's kind of like the romanticised good that you've made up just to keep them around. Then make a list of the genuine bad things they're doing to you, the things that you're shifting your boundaries for, you're letting your standards slip. Write those down and think, whoa, this is not good, this is not the person for me, and leave the person. Also, the person might be just doing good things, but if you're in limerence, it's unfair to keep them around because it's not true love, and you're going to really ask for such high expectations if you're not healed that they might not be able to meet. The best thing is to heal, and you can still have high expectations, but it doesn't come from a place of limerence and obsession. It comes from a place of, I love myself and I know what I deserve, and are you going to match that? But limerence, you don't love yourself and you don't know what you deserve, so you will just take the bare minimum. When you're starting to notice that you're becoming a little bit obsessed with someone and you might be falling into limerence, it's really disappointing and hard, but you kind of have to leave them alone because it's only going to make things worse for you. And especially if you haven't done any therapy about it yet, if you notice it, it is best to spend some more time alone. And I know it seems really difficult, and you know, sometimes I get sad because I think it's so unfair that if you have a few mental health issues or you've been, you know, affected with your upbringing or whatever, like you might not get to date and love the same way as your friends that don't suffer with this, say. But I promise you it's protecting yourself. Like, if you wanted to date normally, you would, but you would be, because you feel things so intensely, you would be so broken every single time it happens. And it's almost a way of protecting yourself of, you can date as freely as you want, but I really encourage that you do healing and a bit of therapy first if you're experiencing what I've been talking about, because one, I know what it's like to have that like rage and that disappointment, and those lows are really low, and I know how hard it is to maybe get out of a situation like that. But it's also not fair on the other person. Even if they're triggering you, there may be days where they don't and you're still reacting that way, and it is intense to deal with. So you want to better yourself for yourself, but also the potential right person and your right group of friends. You can even get it with friends. Like, I get it, I feel like I have friends that become my favourite people at times, and like if they let me down, I feel it so intensely and I take it personal. So it's another thing where it's like, okay, clearly you're not quite there yet with your healing, because if you really didn't seek validation, then anything anyone does to you, you wouldn't take so personally. And that's something that I'm still working on and will take probably ages. But you'll notice it when you start getting very angry with people and really obsessed with their validation and making them happy and seeking their approval. Like, you don't want to do that with anyone. Like, you just want to seek approval for yourself and be content with yourself, your authentic self. You're not putting on a persona for anyone. And people will come to you and you can love healthily because you understand yourself more and you've given yourself a bit more credit. It is intense, so I know it might seem really like shitty, but because you're like, no, I like this person, but if you notice that like you're getting quite obsessed and like expecting a lot, or it's feeling a bit up and down, to have the power to walk away and realise I'm not quite ready for this is so important for yourself and that person. You do need to take a step back, because limerence, once you're in it, can be very hard to get out of, especially if the other person is quite triggering or a little bit manipulative. They might clock onto this and like use it against you, or they might be completely unaware, but they don't realise that they're feeding it, and it will go on for 4, 5, 6, 7 years and you don't even realise it. So to have the power to walk away is important, and if you're already in limerence, to have the power to realise that this person isn't right for you. Either they're a great person but they're not giving you what you need, or you're not quite healed yet, or they're the wrong person entirely and you've put them on a pedestal this whole time and they've been triggering you constantly, and it is so okay to let them go. If you do no contact, if you've got a limerence type brain like mine, it will be so much easier. Like, it will feel more of a relief than the whole entire relationship, and you will literally not think about it again. Do you know what I mean? So really have the strength to do it, because I promise you, life is 10 times better without this intenseness, and 10 times better when you do the work and the therapy to understand why you were the way you were. I used to come out of that and think, why was I so obsessed and like put up with all of that, and I was crazy, and I understood it, and I thought half of that was not my fault. And you forgive yourself, and then you know what to do for next time. So please, I encourage everyone to, if this is sounding similar, research limerence, and find out, just maybe look at your upbringing and think, I did have a little bit of an inconsistent upbringing, actually. Maybe I should like really dig into that a bit more. But that's limerence, so hopefully that was something new that you've learned.